approve the minutes from our December 1st, 2021 meeting. If there are any questions or edits that need to be made, now is the time. Otherwise, we can move and approve the minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I move to approve the minutes.
All right, so moved. Is there a second?
I second.
Multiple seconds, for sure. I know Commissioner Schmidt or Walls was in there. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Right, seeing none, the minutes are approved. Now we'll have an introduction to new commissioners, and Scott, can I hand it over to you for that?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. One thing briefly before we do some introductions, in keeping with the spirit of this commission being sort of informal, I did not add a roll call to the agenda, so I'm going to have Olivia Wikle, our civil engineer, take roll call just for the record.
Thanks, Scott. I'll just get right to it then. Chair Dunser?
Here, present.
Great. Vice Chair Bradley?
Present.
Commissioner Gepner?
I'm here.
Great. Commissioner Mahoney? Commissioner Schmidt?
Here.
Commissioner O'Howard?
Here.
Commissioner Edgerton? Commissioner Waltz?
Here.
Commissioner Durzak?
Here.
Great. And then I forget, Scott, do I take a roll for liaison?
Thanks, Olivia. No, you can just visualize who's here, I think, at this point.
Okay, great. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Olivia. Okay, so I know we did introductions our December commission meeting, but since we have a new commissioner, Jim Mahoney, joining us, I think it'll be beneficial for him to get to know his counterparts on the commission. So I guess just to keep this flowing, I'll just call on folks from my list so we don't stumble over each other. So I guess we'll just start with you, Mr. Chair, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hello, welcome. My name is Wes Dunser. This is my second year on the Ridgefield Transportation Commission during this term, and I was on 1 year prior, so total third year. I've been a Ridgefield resident since 2015, and I'm excited to help the commission be very future-oriented in our decision and planning process. So welcome.
Thank you. Commissioner Bradley.
Hello, my name is Seasonality Bradley, and this is my second term on the commission. So I just finished up a 3-year term, and I'm excited to get started with the rest of the work on the Transportation Commission. Welcome.
Commissioner Gepner.
Hi, I'm David Gepner. I'm part of this group to enhance the median age so that to offset all the young people and give you some perspective from an old guy. I understand we're working on pushing the wheel things in the rest homes. We're going to decide whether we put tennis balls on the bottom or whether we use wheels.
Thank you. And then our new Commissioner Mahoney, do you want to introduce yourself? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry about that. I'm used to having it on my stick. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, I'm Jim Mahoney. Live up near Sheridan Hills grade school. Been in Richfield for about 30 years. I'm very excited to help out on the Transportation Commission, and I'm both a commuter to downtown, hopefully again soon, both by bike, bus, and I love running around the western part of this town.
Great, thank you. We're excited to have you with us. Commissioner Schmidt.
Sure. Well, welcome to Jim. Kyle Schmidt, live over by Fremont Park, and I think this is second or third year on the commission, something like that. As we noted for Ben a couple weeks ago, it's all been kind of during this odd space of time we're all in here. So excited to continue the work this year, and proud of everything Richfield's done the last couple of years, and it's been a pleasure to be a part of it.
Commissioner O'Howard.
Hi, great to meet you. This is my second year on the commission. I've been a resident since 2019. I'm really used to saying that I'm brand new to Richfield, but I guess it's not that new. But the pandemic makes everything just blend into 1 year. So I still feel very new to Richfield. I'm over on Sheridan 74th, so not too far from you. So great to meet you. Welcome.
Commissioner Walls.
Welcome, Jim. And I believe starting the third term on the commission. I was also on the some other boards and things in the city because I've been a resident since 1995. So also an old timer with, as they say, perspective, I guess. So welcome.
Commissioner Durzak.
Hello. I'm starting my second term. I live near Roosevelt Park on the other side of town. I've been a Richfield resident for 20 years, and that's gone fast. I've really enjoyed being on this committee. It's a lot of responsibility. Seeing how this transportation issues have evolved. I'm enjoying being part of it and look forward to the next couple of years. And so, welcome. Look forward to working with you.
And I think it's important, Councilmember Hayward O'Leary, your background with the commission, et cetera.
Yeah, I'm Sean Hayward O'Leary. I represent Ward 2 on the City Council, and this is my third liaison-ish role to this commission. So I've been sitting at a meeting since 2013. Initially got involved in Richfield as a bike advocate, which obviously relates to a lot of the work that this commission does. I'm personally multimodal, very passionate about bike ped safety still, and also very interested in the way that transportation and redevelopment go hand in hand, like thinking of 66th. So excited to be here, and welcome to the commission, Jim.
Thank you, everyone. And then we'll just briefly touch on staff. I'll start. Scott Colzer, Administrative Analyst, Public Works Department. I've been helping out the commission on and off, but more extensively since early 2020. And I will turn it over to your official Transportation Commission liaison, Transportation Engineer Ben Manabog.
Good evening, everyone. Ben Manabog, I use he, him pronouns, and I started with Richfield's Public Works Department this past fall, and I'm excited to work with all you.
Olivia, why don't you go?
Sure. Hi, I'm Olivia Wikle. I'm a civil engineer over at Public Works, and I've been there for about, I think, 1.5 years now. I usually provide just project updates and then take minutes for Transportation Commission meeting. But nice to meet everybody.
And Mr. Powers.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Welcome, Commissioner Mahoney. My name is Joe Powers. I'm the city engineer over in Public Works. I've been with the city now for about 2 years, and I'll be probably stepping back a little bit from Transportation Commission here now that we have been on board for a few months and up to speed running the commission, but I'll be in and out on meetings and look forward to working with you and continuing to work with the rest of the commission. So welcome and thank you for joining.
And I can't not introduce our guest tonight, Mr. Ruland. Real briefly before we get to his item, do you want to introduce yourself?
For sure. I was going to do it before mine, but that's fine. And before I even start, I'm going to challenge Mr. David Gepner about his question about being a little bit more seasoned. As someone that has passed me on his bike while me driving a car on no less than a dozen occasions, I question, and I would say that age is only a number, Mr. Gepner. I'm Neil Rulin, the Communication Engagement Manager for the city. I know that I know a lot of you, not all of you, but I do everything involving the website, social media, media relations, graphic design, you know, really all kinds of anything. If it involves public events, I'm usually there. I take a bunch of photos. I really, it involves communications or interacting with residents for a special project or initiative. There's a good chance I'm probably involved in it. So always excited to work with the commissions like you folks and really anybody in the city. So that's kind of what I do.
Thanks, Neil. And then I see our Richfield bike advocate, Jan Mathias, hopped on. Jan, do you mind telling us a bit about yourself?
Yes. The struggle is real with my computer. Hang on. At least be able to see me, right? Or not?
Can hear you.
Okay. So I'm the liaison for the Richfield Bike Advocates. We've been together as a group since 2012. And really just here to be able to kind of speak up for transportation for all. So whenever that comes up in conversation, being that person who helps like direct that conversation. So far this group is amazing with it. So I don't have to do a whole lot of work.
Thank you. And Mr. Chair, I'll turn it back to you for the next item.
Okay, great. The next item on our agenda is the election of our 2022 officers for chair and the vice chair position. And so I think at this time it'd be best to hand it back over either to you or to Ben or someone else.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'll just, if you recall, last year we went the voice vote route. We kind of enumerated what we had done in our bylaws that we adopted last summer. So just real briefly, we'll start with the chair election first. You are able to nominate a fellow commissioner. You may also nominate yourself. That individual would want to, accept the potential of taking the role as chair. And then if we have just one person nominated, we will just take an up or down vote. If in the event there's two folks that want to pursue one of the officer positions, we would do a voice vote. And in the event of a tie, Councilmember Hayward O'Leary would break the tie. So with that, I guess I'll turn it back to the chair and probably we could open it up for nominations for chair.
All right, is anyone interested in nominating themselves or someone else for the position of chair? And I'll say I'm not going to be running for chair this year, so I'll just put that out there.
I can nominate myself for chair.
Okay, great, thank you. Husnia? Is there anyone else that was interested or would like to nominate someone to be chair? All right. Seeing none, it's just Husnia. And then Scott, did you want to do an up or down vote right now, or did you want to wait till we have a vice chair as well?
I think you guys could just call for yays or nays on that, and then we'll move on.
Sure. Okay, all those in favor of Husnia Bradley being the chair of the Transportation Commission, please signify by raising your hand and saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Seeing none, looks unanimous. Congratulations, Chair Bradley.
Congratulations.
And I did just want to say, yeah, congratulations. Just for continuity's sake tonight, I think Chair Dunster will continue as chair for this whole meeting, and then you'll assume the role in March. Chair-elect Bradley.
Thanks for letting me know.
Okay, and then vice chair is our next position. So same thing, but if anyone would like to nominate themselves or someone else for the position of vice chair.
I'd nominate myself as vice chair.
All right, Commissioner Walls as vice chair. Would anyone else be interested or nominating someone? Okay, seeing none, we'll do the same thing. We'll do an up or down vote. All those in favor of appointing Chair Walls as as Commissioner Walls as vice chair, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Say nay. Seeing none, looks unanimous. Congratulations, Vice Chair Walls. Okay. All right, moving on now to the Ridgefield Strategic Planning part of our agenda to hand it over to Neil.
Thank you, Wes. So I'm here today because I want to talk about strategic planning. Richfield, has done a really great job, in part because of our commissions and the work they do at really planning for a strong future for the city. But a lot of our strategic planning up until this point was kind of segmented. Like Public Works Department had a strategic plan, Public Safety had a strategic plan. It was much more, in the individual departments than centralized in city administration. And really what we're trying to do is formalize everything to really come up with a 3 to 5 year roadmap. And why that's important is because it's always been the case for cities and counties for the most part, and states too a lot of times, that you only have so many resources to go around. Now, you want to use those resources as smart as possible, and you want to make sure that you're providing the services and the programs like you yourselves, the residents, want, and issues that are important to them. So really what we're trying to do is determine that. And then, and what we're doing, a big part of that is reaching out to stakeholders. What we're doing right now, up until about a couple weeks ago, most of the work has been internal. We've been working on environmental scan and kind of a situation analysis to kind of determine where we are. Based on, we've got a lot of really good data from the census and from other organizations like Greater MSP about, where we stack up against maybe our neighbors, what our city looks like, where we're growing, where we might not be growing, things like that. And really, we're going to take all that information and really look at it with our policymakers as well as our leaders internally at the city. And figure out, where we want to put our efforts. But the other area, and I would say, especially with what I do for the city, the most important area would be the community engagement. And the community engagement is really broken into 3 groups. One, which Scott will be kind of either, I don't know, Scott, if you've sent it or we'll be sending it afterwards, is the resident survey. And for a city our size, our consultant, we're going to 3 responses to that survey. Well, knowing how engaged Richfield residents are, we're pretty much at the bottom end of that, only a couple weeks into this. So we're fully expecting to blow past the 400 mark of that with really out much, we're hoping for that. I would love 500-600. The more people really that participate in it, the better. And the great thing, and this is where the Transportation Commission really comes in. So one, you guys should take the survey for sure, but also promote it with your friends, family, and neighbors. Because as I said, the more people that fill it out, the better picture that we have of what residents want. And there's everything on this survey from kind of figuring out where we are in regards to the certain services we offer, but almost, I would say, most importantly, for planning purposes, what are some of the, I would say, more substantial projects that we should take on, in the next couple of years. There's everything on there that pertaining to the Transportation Committee about multimodal transportation. There's questions about pedestrians. There's questions about biking. There's questions about trails. From what I remember, I just pulled it up, but it's been a long couple of days in the communication engagement world for Richfield. So that's one big part of it. So as I said, if you guys could take the survey and encourage other folks to do it, that'd be super duper helpful. Share it on social media, share it, if you're members of the community page or any other groups that you're a part of at the city, or your friends or neighbors, anything like that, be very, very helpful. The second process, the second major part of the community engagement effort that we're doing is focus groups. Last week we did 6 focus groups with a variety of individuals. Councilmember Hayward O'Leary was on one, our appointed and city leaders one. And if I'm remembering correctly, Commissioner Bradley, you were on one as well, weren't you? The community leadership one.
Yes.
Yep. So we're getting a lot of opinions, a lot of voices from a lot of folks. And we still have 3 more of those to do. In the end, we're probably going to have right around 100 individuals that took part in those focus groups. And those focus groups are different from our surveys because where the surveys give us a good qualitative approach that we can kind of make some strong assumptions. The focus groups really allow us to deep dive with some of our different populations and really take a harder look with a very important segment of that population and really flesh ideas out a little bit more than we'd be able to do in a survey. And the last element of our community engagement plan is community meetings. That's been a big part of what we've been wanting to do. COVID has kind of held us back. Hopefully with some of the numbers going in the correct direction, we'll be able to announce dates for those in the next coming month or so. But every time we plan on announcing them, it seems like something regarding to the pandemic hits and we just keep having to have a kind of wait and see approach. But those will be ward specific where each council member that is responsible for the ward will host a meeting, and anyone that wants to come, we will have kind of as focused a conversation with a larger group as we can have, with some general questions and answers and maybe some group work as well, and really get some ideas about some projects that people would be interested in us looking at in the near future, as well as kind of where we're at as a city. The nice thing is, as I said, there's been a lot of planning successes in the city before, where this is the first time we've done this as a formal kind of centralized plan. If you all know about the comp plan that the city does every so many years, that's an example of strategic planning that's worked out really well for us. Has really provided just a fantastic guide for a lot of the planning in regards to development, redevelopment, as well as zoning and other things as well. And our police department has done some great strategic planning where some of you folks that lived here before we redid Portland Avenue know that the intersection of Portland and 66 was statistically, I believe it's the second most dangerous intersection in all of Hennepin County. And police department working with Public Works identified that intersection as an intersection we didn't want people to have crashes anymore, didn't want to have any more audio related injuries, didn't want people speeding through the traffic light that was there, and that changed to a roundabout. And the conversation I think early on was just what can we do to fix this intersection to make it safer, is an example of strategic planning really working well. But that's really kind of my explanation for it. I apologize. It's I was going to have a presentation, but it's as I said, it's been a busy past couple of days of what's been going on, so I just kind of did my best to explain everything. But if you guys have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Or Councilmember Hayward O'Leary, you can feel free to jump in and answer anything or add anything as well. But David, you have a question?
Yes, Neil, while you were talking, I went and did a web search of a survey in Richfield, and there's one from April of 2020. I don't think that's the one you're referring to. Can Scott email us the link to the survey that you're referring to?
Yeah, for sure. It's in the news section of the website under strategic planning. But Scott, could you send an email to folks afterwards and make sure that they have the correct link?
Yes, thank you. I had not sent it out. I wanted you to kind of set the stage tonight. So.
No, perfect. That sounds great.
Google doesn't know about it?
What'd you say?
Google doesn't know about it apparently, right? Because Google search didn't bring it up.
Well, there you go. Well, we will try to improve upon that.
I was trying to multitask and do the survey while I listened to you, and I wasn't able to. But so you had my undivided attention that way.
So it's a win-win then.
Okay.
Yep, go for it, Commissioner Mahoney.
Yeah, I guess I'd have a couple of. Yes, I am unmuted. A couple of questions. One, what's the deadline for it to be completed? And then 2, are there some pamphlets at City Hall on it or anything like that for handouts in case you run into someone versus kind of old school?
No, it's
education.
We don't have any handouts for it yet. But we definitely can put something. We've talked about it, and we can put something together, and then we can make sure that we can send some copies to the liaisons and make sure that they can get them to folks and things like that, or put them out in there as well. Deadline, we originally we're gonna have the deadline of mid-February, but we pushed a few things back, and I think it's the end of February is gonna be. I think it's the last day of February, so the 28th is the last day that the survey can be taken. But it you know, depending on response rates and stuff like that, if we do have to push it out a week or two, we will be able to do that. But we're kind of shooting for having a more finite process of the last day of February. Other questions?
All right. Are there any other questions? Okay. Seeing none, thank you very much. We'll now move on to our next item on our agenda, the speed limits primer with Ben.
Thank you. I will share screen. All right, so today's presentation is to give you all an overview of speed limits in the city and an upcoming effort by the city to understand what the city and the community would like to do about our current speed limits. So I'll go through a number of topics here. The way that I'd like to go through this is please ask questions as I go through, and then I'll also have time for questions and conversations at the end as well. So this out of the way. So in August of 2019, the Minnesota State Legislature changed law that gave local communities a more authority to set their own speed limits. And as a part of this statute, there's a couple of things that a city has to do in order to use this. And so and they're listed here, but the main ones that I'll be focusing on today will be the second one, which is a safety engineering and traffic analysis. And then elements of number 2 and 3 will kind of come further along in this effort. To give some context, since August of 2019, a number of cities in the Twin Cities have taken advantage of this new law. As some of you might know, Minneapolis and St. Paul jointly changed their speed limits. Their default is now 20 miles an hour on all city streets, with then a number of other streets at higher speed limits, and that's generally the busier streets of the city. Following that, the city of St. Louis Park changed theirs to a similar system, and that was just done this past December. And then the city of Edina is also changing their speed limits, but it'll be a default of 25 miles an hour, and they'll be finishing up the sign implementation of that this upcoming spring. What will affect all of these cities and anyone using this new state law is that this only applies to local streets. So in other words, that this can't, cities can't change the speed limits of county roads. So for our context, that would be your 66th Street, your Portland, your Nicollet, and your Xerxes, at least the northwest part of the city that we share with Edina. So what in the in preparation for this analysis, staff will be looking at all of our city policies that have anything to do with transportation, which are the ones listed here, and are and I'm sure that all of you have been involved in one way or another. And what we look to do is take the goals and a lot of the strategies from these policies and boil them down into goals. And we'd like to set goals before we kind of do a huge effort to make sure that when we're kind of at the end, are we meeting what we're trying to expect? And so I've listed a couple in the next couple slides, a few examples from other cities that have undertaken this. And a lot of these you'll see kind of shares the language from that state statute. So on the second one on here, talks about reasonability of the speed limit laws that we set, and then also some of the more conceptual ones of or the different topics that we'll bring into it, like land use changes. And then this one here from the city of Rochester, Minnesota, bringing elements from their transportation plan, like talking about traffic deaths and severe injuries, and talking about the priority of who's trying to move around. So anything like this, part of the state statute talks about using national and any kind of other guidance to help staff come to any sort of recommendation. And so then what we do now and what we've done before, according to state law, is that any local street, their default speed limit is 30 miles an hour. And a lot of that, a lot of the engineering that goes on in the background to set those speeds, if they're anything other than 30 miles an hour, is setting it to what they call the 85th percentile. But what that, to summarize what that really means is that we set those speed limits to the more fast drivers that are out there, the 85th percentile, or kind of 15% people drive faster, different ways to say it. But instead, in kind of catering to those highest speeders, sometimes the speed limit just kind of creeps up and up over time. You can think of that on interstates and highways. But that's not necessarily what we want to prioritize, especially when, as I'll kind of get into later, higher speeds, especially when involved in crashes, result in worse injuries. And so new guidance that has been coming out in the last 5 years is saying that catering to the fastest speeders that are out there is not the best way to set your speed limits. And especially the previous way that you've done it really only works in rural contexts or highways and interstates. And so one of the things what we will be, or what folks are doing more often now, is thinking about median speed limits, or kind of if you stack all of the speeds that everyone does in a line, where's the middle? And so that is kind of the way people are thinking about the data behind it. There are 4 approaches to setting speed limits identified by NACDO, which is a national organization made up of a bunch of cities trying to better their street networks and make them safer for all people. And so the ones listed here are different ways that a city can think of managing their speed limits. So the first one is kind of what we already have right now, is a 30-minute or 30 mile an hour default speed limit. The number 2 on here is a categorical approach, which is what City of Minneapolis, St. Paul, and St. Louis Park did. And those categories can be a number of things, which we can get into as this process kind of goes on. Slow zones, you can also think of in a way as like a school speed limit or school zone, where it would be for either like a neighborhood area or maybe a certain couple corridors. And then the number 4 is a street by street basis. Before I get into some of the other research, is there any questions, or am I moving too fast so I can slow down?
Ben, I do have a question. I did a little research before today, and I found a brochure put out by the Minnesota Department of Transportation, and they say in their Q&A, will lowering the speed limit reduce speeds? And their answer says no. Studies show there's little change in the speed pattern after the posting of a speed limit. The driver is much more influenced by the roadway conditions. And I'm just wondering how that ties into this conversation, especially since this is from a MnDOT document.
Sure. So first, because I believe I've also read the same brochure, I believe, if I remember right, the year on there was about 2015. And so for one, some of the research that I'll get to in a moment will be from the past 2 or 3 years, which will only add to what the MnDOT brochure is saying. And the other thing with that is I do agree that a lot of people will drive what they feel comfortable on, and all of that is, or much of that is due to the way that we've built the street. There are some other things to add with that, but what other cities have found is that for a lot of streets, people are driving a lot slower than you think. And so what changing a speed limit can do is just adjusting that speed limit to what people are doing now. And in a lot of cases, that's actually slower. So we wouldn't want, so in other words, we don't want to encourage people to speed faster.
Thank you. Commissioner Gebner, did you have a question?
Sure. Ben, I'm hopeful the city has done or will do some kind of study to see how many accidents, injuries are happening on the streets that are the county roads. And, the major roads in Richfield that people are likely to go fast on are the county roads and everything but Lindale Avenue. You know whether that's been done? I mean, we have this basket weave method of controlling speed in our city where you can't go more than 2 blocks in most instances without supposedly slowing down for a stop sign. That's something in my mind that has questionable value. It's like crying wolf. If there's a stop sign at every other corner and nobody's there, you tend to disregard the safety of stopping at every intersection you roll through. So back to the original question, does somebody know how many injuries and accidents happened in our city streets where people are likely going slower anyway?
Thank you for the question. And that's something that we will be looking at. And there will be a slide on this that'll be some of the data that we'll be collecting. Because that's also one of the obligations that the city has to do as a part of, if they choose to change their speed limits, is a crash analysis of the city.
And another question, so does the county have the same ability to lower the speed limits on their county roads that are in our city?
They do not. So the counties don't have the same, at least right now. I believe the state legislature is in session, so who knows? But at least right now they do not. And to change speed limits, generally they will need to go to MnDOT to do that.
Mr. Chair, if I could just add,
yes.
Add something. Well, first off, I haven't looked at the slideshow before, talking about the efficacy of this. I'm excited to some of the stuff that Ben's going to get into, because I think part of the answer to that MnDOT brochure is that it's wrong, or that it's not applicable to urban environments. And I think it's a huge change in engineering and their approach to it. And I think it makes a lot of sense. There's no other law that we set based on what the 15% least law abiding do. Imagine if prices at Target were based on how many people stole at the self-checkout or something like that. That's pretty much how speed limits have been set. But specifically with the county roads, I know the analysis hasn't been done. I suspect you probably would find a lot of injuries there. But although we're talking about city street speed limits as part of this process, and that's what this policy will address, the county speed limits are still an outstanding issue. And from an initial data request, just to get a sense of it, of how have the current speed limits been assessed, Ben mentioned the process from MnDOT. The Hennepin County has not done that for a single one of the county roadways. They're signs that say 35 on them for the most part, or 30 in some cases. None have been set through the legal MnDOT process. So I would say, as a council member, it is of interest to me to prod that. And I know Minneapolis has had luck in getting them to lower it because of the technical informality and how they've set them so far. And I think Richfield would be in an excellent position to make such a request if we were using the powers available to us, which is exactly what we'll be discussing today for our local streets.
Thank you. Feel free to continue, Ben, unless there's any other questions, but I'm not seeing any. So.
All right. So some of the more recent research from other cities across the country that have been going through this, and the ones that I'll be sharing today are much larger cities. However, those are the ones that have done this first. So and I'll get into some of the what that means for smaller cities later. But so city of Boston, lowered their speed limits to citywide, and they've seen an improvement of safety for all users. And so the graphic on the right is more depicting the lethality of pedestrians at increasing speeds of impact. And so that's really the drive behind, or one of the drivers behind changing speed limits to make our streets safer. And so what they found in Boston, at least initially, is that while kind of like the overall average speed of all drivers did not change much, the top line on here is are the high rate speeders. So those that are going like over 10 miles an hour over the speed limit. And Boston saw that 30% of those folks, or the rate of people doing that went down by 30%, which is big, especially when thinking of those are the ones that are most danger to the vulnerable users on a street. In the city of Seattle, who went to 20 mile an hour for all of their non-arterial streets, they saw a decrease in their total crashes citywide. And in addition to that, I didn't have that one, but they also saw a lower, that kind of same decrease in their high rate speeders. And then the city of Portland, Oregon, similarly saw more folks decreasing their speeds, and especially those that are at the highest end after lowering from 25 to 20 miles an hour citywide. And so some of the other things that are happening more around the Twin Cities is that the University of Minnesota has partnered with the city of St. Louis Park, and they are looking at a before and after study with their speed limit changes. So for more of a local context, and while they've taken all of their befores, they've got some time. They have to wait for another year to then get kind of those afters. But that's something that's going on in the Twin Cities for that. If any kind of other studies come out in the meantime, I know that there's some efforts, at least some research efforts from other groups in the Twin Cities, and so those will, staff will use those if those kind of come available. What Public Works staff will be doing from after this is working on goal setting, taking those policies and distilling them down into what the best way to approach this is. And then a lot of...
Is Jack woken up for dinner?
Lou, I think you're unmuted, just so you're aware.
Sorry.
What staff will also be doing is collecting data, like we talked about earlier, which one part of that is a crash history of the city, where are crashes happening, and is there a pattern along with that? And then in addition to that, getting traffic data. So that's how many cars are going through certain kinds of streets, and also how fast are they going. And that will inform or greatly inform a lot of what we do too. And that's the end here. Oh, timeline on that. So we'll be working on those traffic counts and everything else in the spring. And after we get all of that, we'll be taking an analysis of that and everything else that we've got. And then say everything went great and we got all of that in, and then came back and commission and council, everyone loves it. at the earliest, this would be a 2023 implementation, and that is reason for that is to get all the signs that may be necessary for a change. There's also other changes to our infrastructure that we would need, like our traffic signals would need to be retimed, and then there's also an element of community engagement or communication. If we change something, we got to let people know about it so that everyone's kind of on the same page. So that's kind of like the earliest. Anything later may push that date out, but that's what we're expecting so far. That is the end of the presentation. So then happy to answer any questions or anything else.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions?
Maybe just a comment. I was amused by the Rochester statistic where I think they said that they wanted to eliminate severe crashes. Amusing in the sense that the only way to truly eliminate or reduce it to zero would be to eliminate the traffic. But I don't think that's the goal here. I think this is a tool that has some merit in investigating, I think is truly what we're after, right? There's no way we can eliminate traffic or serious accidents without eliminating the traffic altogether.
I will say that so that concept is also known as Vision Zero, which I forget if City of Rochester is a Vision Zero city, but that's certainly what they're kind of using in there. Is something that a lot of cities work towards, and at least having a goal to try and reach, even if out the distance. And so that's likely where that came from. And so then speed limits would be a tool as a part of their toolbox to get there.
Commissioner Mahoney.
Yeah, comment and a question. I think what Rochester's using it as an aspirational goal. It's what you dream, you build everything toward. Ben, what do you expect to see out of the study? You're an expert at this. What would be a surprise such that you don't believe what you're seeing?
I wouldn't believe that folks are driving faster than the speed limit in a lot of our local streets. I feel like a lot of what we've seen from other cities is that people drive slower than 30 miles an hour. However, don't know until we know. So that's one of the things that we'll be looking for. Something that I expect is that we'll have more crashes on our busier streets, and that's one because those are normally higher speed streets, ones that have a higher speed limit already, and then also just you have more cars, you have more opportunities for crashes, and that's I guess those are the first two that come off the top of my head.
Commissioner Dierzak, and you're still muted. There you go.
Yep, thanks. Will those speed tests be seasonal in a sense that you'll be able to see differences between speeds in January versus July? I mean, will there be, a longer time frame to see, how people are driving in, winter and dark versus summer and light, and no traction issues and ice and snow issues? Will those speed tests take that into account, a longer time frame?
So generally, no. I'm not aware of studies out there comparing seasonality or day or night as far as speeds go. I would expect that folks drive slower in the winter just because at least around these parts where we have no snow and ice around. But apart from that, these will be using the stuff that we get in the spring, and then some of the existing data that we already have from either other engineering efforts or data that our police department collects as a part of other kind of their speed boards.
Any other questions? I do have a question, and I love the idea of, trying to reduce, deaths or injuries. A couple thoughts is that, clearly the person who would be struck, if they're like a 80-year-old person versus a 22-year-old person, the speed is going to have a big difference, right? So wondering just if that can be considered, the age, the demographics of an area, right? But also, do you have any idea what the cost would be of, updating the signs and all of these other things, compared to, if we were to take that same money and invest it into priority streets that don't have sidewalks, something that we can control more, because even if you have a new posted speed limit, a car could still be exceeding it versus a sidewalk. Seems like it's going to be a lot more effective, in protecting people. Just kind of wondering what the cost analysis is of that.
Thank you for the question, Chair. So we've not gone, so one of the other things that we'll be working on with this effort is a cost estimate. So having done this at another city, and it'll depend because some cities have the capacity to do things in-house. For instance, I learned that our Public Works Department makes their own signs for a lot of things. So there can be some flexibility in what those costs are. But certainly I would expect an effort like this would be above six figures, so above 100,000. Now, is it $1 million? No, it's definitely going to be closer to the 100. But then again, that's something that we would look at because every city is different, every context is different. So we'll be looking for that.
Yes, Councilmember Hayford O'Leary.
Just wanted to put a shameless plug in since Neil is gone. If you think things like we ought to be having a greater budget for things like more sidewalks where they're needed, that would be a great thing to put in the strategic planning survey, because that is the big picture thing that we need to hear and prioritize as a city. I did just want to mention one thing, because I understand when people hear that Vision Zero concept, and we're not here to formally adopt a Vision Zero policy for Richfield, but it does motivate our thinking here. And people do hear it, and the first reaction is, as I heard from Commissioner Walls, that like that's unrealistic. And in some sense it is, but I did just want to pull up this comparison to airline travel. That per mile traveled, you are 62 times more likely to die in a car crash than on an airplane. If 40,000 Americans were dying in airplane crashes every year, that would be a crisis. And we should see the amount of people who die in car crashes as a crisis too. So I think you're right that we'll never, accidents happen, we will never get to zero, but the level that we've decided is acceptable is shockingly high compared to what we find acceptable in other areas. So I think it's important to think that it's closer than we might think. That's all.
Yes, Ben.
And I will also add, I forget if it was in 2019 or in 2020, the city of Oslo, Norway, they did achieve Vision Zero for 1 year. They did not have a traffic death. So it has been done.
Well, this is exciting. I'm excited to see what the results of these survey shows. Are there any other questions or comments before we move on? All right, seeing none. Thank you very much for this. Looking forward to hearing more. Our next item on our agenda this evening are project updates. The first one is the 77th Street and Lindale Signal.
And that is back to me. So for those that weren't at the last meeting, this upcoming year, the city is looking at replacing the traffic signal that's at the intersection of 77th Street and Lindale Avenue. So right now, what we're doing is that we are taking some traffic data using one of our consultants, both at that intersection and then a bit further west. And so then that information will help inform some of the analysis that they'll be doing for us, and more information will come as we move forward with that. The hopes is that that signal will be replaced yet this year as a part of the 2022 construction season.
Yes, Commissioner Gepner, and you're still muted.
I will I was at the last meeting. I don't remember a discussion about that intersection. I'm curious to know what, why are they changing it? What are they doing? Or proposing to do?
Thank you for the question. So there was a study of all of our traffic signals done, I believe it was last year, and they had identified Lindale and 77th as one of the ones that needs to be replaced, and that's due to some of the age of the infrastructure there, and so that's the main one of the main things driving us replacing it, and then also looking to replace it ahead of a lot of the diverted traffic that will be happening as a part of the I-494 construction.
So it's just new equipment. It's going to be the same intersection, same signaling.
It may not. So we're very early in this. Now, is there, some minor changes can be made. This is not a reconstruction of the intersection where we would dig up everything else underneath. This is more of just the what we call like the signal mast arms and the controllers and the lights.
Any other questions regarding this? I know you mentioned it's not a reconstruction, but since we do love roundabouts here, have roundabouts been considered there? Just out of curiosity.
I don't believe they are for this, and in my recollection, and one of the existing staff can jump in, but I believe that it does not work in this instance, and that was previously studied.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'll just jump in real quick. It was a consideration, but it never went very far in the process. One of the biggest issues would be the right-of-way requirements there. There's some pretty significant large developments, especially on the north side of that intersection, and we just wouldn't be able to fit a roundabout there. I don't recall off the top of my head how far we got into the traffic analysis, but I'm not sure that the traffic volumes and movements would work with the roundabout through there either. And just to add to answer a little more in detail Commissioner Gepner's question, part of the signal analysis that we had done in the last year or so, we determined that there's some specific components in that signal particularly that are no longer produced and would be very, very hard to source. And if they were to fail at any point, we would essentially be have a non-functioning signal until we could replace it. And we really don't want to be in that situation on an emergency basis. So we're going to go ahead and get that fixed up.
Great, thank you. So now 77th Underpass.
Chair, I believe there was a number of hands that were up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Who did I not see? Whoever it was it in the chat? Oh, Commissioner Mahoney. And you're still muted too.
I'm learning how this system works. Excuse me. I use a different one at work. Hey, what's the useful life of that? I mean, it sounds like you answered my question though, Ben, or someone else did. The useful life. So basically what you're saying is that a lot of the equipment, it must be about 20 years old, isn't it? What is the useful life on that? Don't you cycle through that just to keep them current? Is that kind of what's going on at 77th and Lindale?
Thank you for the question. So I don't know when this particular signal was installed. And Joe can correct me if I'm wrong. I believe a signal's life is roughly 30 years, but please correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, a traffic signal life we consider typically about 25 to 30 years. I just because I don't have it in front of me, the Lindale signal was built sometime in the 90s. I want to say 91 or 93, possibly.
Let me enter. The whole 77th Street was put in the early 90s, so you're right on your estimate of when the signal was installed.
Yeah, so it's about 30 years old at this point, and it's at the end of its life cycle. So in addition to some of those components failing, the structural steel for the signal poles and the mast arms are starting to have corrosion issues, and that's just a fact of life living in a northern climate where we are forced to salt our roads and keep the roads safe. It affects our infrastructure pretty severely sometimes. Looks like there's another question, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, Commissioner Walls, please.
Just a follow up as well. I was wondering about, is there a replacement in the works for, excuse me, Upton and 76? That light's been malfunctioning about every other day now for the last couple of weeks. It's been defaulting to the 4-way red flashing.
Oh, good to know.
Right.
I'll make sure we talk to our operations staff about that. I'm guessing they're aware of it. I haven't heard about it. Scott, have you heard anything about that that's come in? Or do you know if our operations staff knows about it?
Yeah, thank you. No, it's fair to say we do a lot of those older signals on those smaller intersections. We do get frequent calls about flashing red cycle, and we're able to take care of it pretty quickly. But I mean, to the bigger point, if it's doing it frequently, it's might need some attention. Joe, do you want to touch on the feasibility study? Didn't we rate all the signals in the city?
Yeah, that's what I was going to get into next. Part of the study that Ben mentioned that what helped us determine we need to do this replacement at Lindale. We actually assessed every single one of the signals that the city owns. So that excludes all the signals on county roadways that the county owns. But we actually do have a rough kind of feasibility schedule laid out for rehab and replacement of all the city-owned signals over the next 15 to 20 years. Without looking at it right now in front of me, I'm not sure where that signal at Upton falls. It's probably, I think it was probably in the 2027 to 2030 timeframe, somewhere in there for a replacement. Maybe it looks like Ben might have it up.
Yes, so I did bring it up. So we so the actual replacement of it is on here 26 for thinking of long range planning, but then there's another line item for this next year as well, which I'd have to go into the study again, but I would assume that would be some kind of touch up or repair.
Yeah, one thing that was identified for a number of signals, especially along that 76th, 77th Street corridor, is doing some upgrades to the signal heads or the lights, light assemblies on the masts. Some controller upgrades where some things are out of date. Upgrading things like the pedestrian signal heads, so the walk signals, and doing some ADA, Americans with Disability. Wow, why am I blanking on what ADA stands for? I'm sorry. That's something I deal with every day. Basically sidewalk improvements around the signals as well. So, and if we do some of those things like upgrading the signal heads or controller components, most of those upgrades are things that we would be able to salvage then and use in a new signal assembly a few years down the road. So we're not installing new stuff and then just wasting it 4 or 5, 6 years later.
Commissioner Gepner.
Sorry for the monopolization that I'm creating in your meeting. We like to think of Richfield as a progressive city, and this group is a part of keeping us progressive. So when can we start calling 77th Street International Boulevard?
That's actually a conversation that's come up recently in the last few weeks. We're having some internal discussions with the city manager. Director Asher's been talking with City Manager Rodriguez about the timeline on that. I don't know if it's Councilmember Hayward, Olivia, has any of that come in front of council lately?
I've asked Katie for updates, City Manager Katie Rodriguez for updates about that. I've only been told that it was really driven by Steve Devich, who's retired, and although it's still on the table, it's not been a high priority yet, but is still to be determined, possibly in conjunction with the underpass opening.
Yeah, it's something we're looking at with the underpass opening and with the 494 project coming up. One of the recent conversations we've had is about we have a new equity toolkit that's been developed that the city, every department is running improvements and projects and initiatives through an equity this equity toolkit to kind of determine how it affects different parts of our community, different social economic groups in our community. So we're planning on running the International Boulevard name change through that toolkit before there's any action on that. And I don't believe that process has been started, but it's something coming up internally in the next couple months here.
Could you elaborate a little bit more on what that would look like, running that name through the toolkit?
I haven't worked through the toolkit myself yet, so I'm not super familiar with it. Ben actually might have some familiarity. I think he does. So maybe you could cover that one, Ben.
So what the toolkit does, and so for the instance of International Boulevard, it wouldn't just be, now we have a new names, but then it would be, what are the implications of that? So there's, for instance, you have to change signs, so there's an infrastructure cost. Where would that cost go? For any kind of businesses or residences that are along there, would there be any costs assessed to them, or that they would have to incur from that change if you had to change all of your businesses' addresses or personal things, and trying to kind of gather any kind of unintended consequences of what may seem like a small decision. So that's what the purpose of the toolkit would do for this.
All right, thank you. And then back to the light, would that be like a smart light in some way, since it would have to last 30 some years? Would the new light, be technologically advanced, so it can keep up with all the changes that'll happen over the next 3 decades?
I can cover that one, Ben, unless you want to. I guess to my knowledge, there's I don't think anything in terms of connected car infrastructure and auto driving cars is really being built into signals at this point, or at least not cost effectively. So that's not something we're looking at. The signal would likely have video detection, which is pretty standard. There's cameras that are mounted on the mast arms, so we have that on signals throughout Richfield already. And one thing we are looking at, especially in conjunction with the 494 project, is implementing a little bit more connectivity between our signal systems and having some remote access. It's not something we have with our signal systems in Richfield currently because we have so few signals. Cities like Bloomington or entities like MnDOT and Hennepin County, all of their signals are interconnected, so you can literally sit at a desk and pull up a map and change lights from green to red if you wanted to, which isn't advised typically. But we're looking to implement some of that technology with some of our signals, especially along that corridor. So for instance, during the 494 project, we'll have a little more control in real time over those signals and can kind of use them to manage traffic a little bit more actively than we can currently.
Okay, thank you.
I can hop in on the next project update, which is going to be 77th Street Underpass. Obviously, it's been a little chilly outside, so as far as construction work goes, it's always a little bit slower in the winter. But that being said, the work that's been mostly going down at the underpass has been works on the bridge that's going to connect southbound Highway 77 to 494 westbound. So they've been mostly working on the abutments and footings for that. One of their other kind of big goals over the winter is to be doing some pipe jacking, which they've gotten done in the past couple of weeks. That's for storm infrastructure. And then some grading in Washington Park. That part of the project has been a little bit slower just because of the weather. It's really hard to dig frozen ground, so they typically don't do that. But for the most part, work remains on schedule. What I'm hoping for within the next couple of weeks is probably some warmer weather and seeing a little bit more progress. But that's kind of what's going down there. If anyone has any questions.
Not seeing any questions. No, thank you. Appreciate the update.
Sure. And I'll actually lead into the next one for 65th Street reconstruction. So a bit more of an update on that one. We're basically right towards kind of the end of the design process. We're still doing we still have, I believe, one more revision. Joe, correct me if I'm wrong. I think we're like really, really close to 95%, if I remember correctly. So with that in mind, we're kind of getting down to the nitty gritty of things. We're planning to take the project's plan to be taken out to bid late February or so. And that's going to be put on by our consultant, Kimley Horn. And then, weather permitting, we're hoping to be doing construction, ideally mid to late March, I would probably say. And for those, I can't remember if I provided this update at the last one, but the general kind of process of 65th Street reconstruction is that's going to be working from the west to the east. So that's going to be starting at 66th Street and Ray Drive, going north and then traveling east toward Lindale, and then it'll eventually go to Nicollet. But based off of just discussions that we've had as far as schedule goes, we think that the first half of the project, which would be from Ray Drive and 66th Street all the way to right about where the railroad is, north of the hub, that'll probably be happening in 2022, and then the rest of that would likely happen in 2023. So it'll be a 2-year project. That's a little tentative just given supply and demand stuff with all the impacts of COVID, but that's my update for 65th Street.
Thank you. Any questions? All right, seeing no questions or comments, thank you for that update.
Thank you.
Moving on now to the Trunk Highway 77 resurfacing.
Yes. So for those, so MnDOT will be resurfacing Highway 77, essentially for the full length of Richfield in this upcoming season. What that will be some concrete work that they're doing on the actual highway portion, but then some more local improvements that they'll be making is some ramp reconstruction and some kind of sidewalk in the areas around these ramps. So the ones that come to mind are at 66th Street, actually also right by the Public Works building, as well as right near the trail, the regional trail at Diagonal Boulevard. They expect this work to be done between April and November, and we will share more information when we get it. We know that they're just working through the end of their kind of final official plans, and then they'll be getting towards their construction staging and other things like that soon.
Okay, thank you for that update. Any questions or comments on this? All right, seeing none, thank you. Moving on, I-494 Airport to 169 update.
That's me again. So plenty of things are going on with I-494. So for one, the City Council will be looking at their municipal consent determination at the end of this month. And what that is the kind of the state statute, what's it? Authority to approve a project. What'll be going on in addition to that is that the the MnDOT team, in addition with the cities, are working on the aesthetics of the corridor. And so right now there's there's an open survey that's supplementing some of the listening sessions that they've been having. The last one was in kind of actually I think it was like 2 days ago, but what the survey is that they're looking at 4 different concepts, and these are things like a lake bed, or like blue skies, blue waters. And what kind of these aesthetic themes will do is inform what some of the more decorative things like concrete walls, the railings, the lighting, kind of the areas where public art could be in the future. And so that's that survey that MnDOT is hosting. That's something that we can also send to the commissioners. It is open to anyone in any of the communities that are along the corridor, and so that's something that they have and will be opening, or they'll be open until February 15th. One thing that's also going along with the project is the locations of the noise walls adjacent to the highway, and that's more of a process for the adjacent property owners and residents. And so folks that pertains to will be contacted directly by MnDOT via mail, and that is an entire process that MnDOT takes care of, that the city is not a part of. I believe that's everything that I've got at this point for 494, unless there's any questions.
Is there any reason to think that the city wouldn't give municipal consent? Is there anything holding that up?
Not at this time. However, we'll be speaking with the council on the 8th to check in again to work through anything. But we've been working with MnDOT and Hennepin County and Bloomington on a number of outstanding items, and yeah, we see, at least right now, nothing getting in the way of municipal consent.
Great, thank you. Any questions on the 494 Airport to 169? All right, not seeing any. Thank you for the update. Next is Metro Transit Bus Rapid Transit.
I'll be doing that update. There isn't much of an update. The 2 routes that I've talked about in the past have been Orange Line and D Line. As far as Orange Line goes, that is completely done. So those are stations over at 35W and 66 in Richfield, and then 76 in Knox. So if you haven't gotten a chance to ride the Orange Line, go for it. The stations are really nice. It looks pretty, all that jazz. As far as D Line goes, that's along Portland Avenue, south of 66th Street. So you've probably kind of seen the face pads for those stations. We're going to be getting the actual structures for those bus stations later this spring, hopefully for 2022. So that should be wrapped up this year as well. But that won't be for at least another couple months or so. But otherwise, that's all I have on those 2.
Great, thank you for the update. Any questions? Okay, thank you very much. Seeing none, we will move on to our liaison and other commissions and bike advocates section. Let's start with CC liaisons.
Sure. We actually got a few different updates, just kind of general things of high interest from the council. First to mention, yeah, the Orange Line opening was great. That was actually just after our last meeting. I know both Joe and Ben, and I think somebody else was there too, and now I'm blanking, but did see several Richfield faces there. It was a really great event. If I've not taken the line, it's, you know, if you can get it at 66, or you can get it down by Best Buy on 35 or on Knox Avenue down by Best Buy, check it out. If you have no reason to ride the bus at all, at least go take a walk through the new tunnel, because there is a bike ped trail that connects the cul-de-sac of Knox down around to Lucky's 13 in Bloomington. Other items I wanted to mention, our budget was approved in December. I was going to try to look up the percentage. I believe it's a 4.5% levy increase. We really did try to keep things as tight as we could given COVID-19, but inevitably everything is costing more as time goes on. but we feel good about the budget that was approved for 2022. COVID-19, obviously you're all aware of it. It's been a lot worse and a little better. We did just have an informal discussion about if the city wanted to pursue a mask mandate. At that time, the majority, at the recommendation of the city manager, did not want to move forward with that. I think it is still possible if things were to get significantly worse in the future that we would revisit that. There's been no talk of a vaccine mandate like Minneapolis for the restaurants. And I'm happy to go back to any of these items if there are questions after, but I'm just going to pass through. Wood Lake Nature Center, we're continuing to push for state funding for half the cost of rebuilding that building. In case you don't know, we anticipate a $20 million new building on the site to significantly improve a lot of what we can do there and create rentable space and better education for kids. So we hosted both from the Minnesota House and the Minnesota Senate tours of legislators to help see some of the issues there, see how beautiful Wood Lake Nature Center is. Then we just hosted the Senate tour 2 weeks ago. Last two things, this decade of development information from the city I think was really helpful. Our community development director for 20 years, John Stark, has moved on to a new city, so they kind of compiled this info, and it really shows how much we've done. And I think a lot of us moved here in the 2010s, and we've been part of a big change. Just to note from that report, 1,500 new homes have been built in the last 10 years, $440 million in new development, and 700,000 square feet of commercial floor space. And this doesn't even include the hundreds and hundreds of housing units that are under construction right now. So it's really awesome to see how much we've been growing and all the success we've had in the last decade. Largely thanks to community development staff. Last thing to mention is a specific development that was of high interest. That 101 East 66th Street development was approved for a 5-story building with some ground floor retail and 80 apartments. This is just east of the Old Country Buffet building on 66th. All right, that's everything from the council the last couple months, or the things that I thought to mention. Anything else anybody's wondering about, or any questions on those items?
Any questions or comments? Not seeing any. Thank you so much for your report. Okay. Are there any other commissioners here from other commissions? I don't think I saw any. Nope. But we do have Jan Mathis here representing the bike advocates. Jan, would you like to?
Sure. It looks like Kevin Went has his hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Whoever had their hand up, go ahead.
All right, thanks. Just a short update from the Community Services Commission. Lately, we've been doing some recaps of things that we were doing prior to the end of the year. Winter food drive ended up getting, I think it was $1,700 worth of food donations to provide to the local shelters. We've been doing some placemaking project updates, and then I think the most interesting update from our last meeting was the Wood Lake Nature Center participation in the Urban Night Sky program. So this is normally a place program to get out of the city somewhere where there isn't light pollution and be able to see the stars. But there are urban locations where they have programs run at night, and Wood Lake Nature Center does that. So they're looking at being designated a Urban Night Sky program, which is pretty cool. Our next event, I guess, actually is we're having the second joint meeting with planning and the council, a work session on the visual quality manual and context-sensitive solutions framework for the I-94 corridor. So very much on the same kind of line as just the discussion here. Yeah, so those are the main things. Our next meeting is our first of the year as well, so we'll do all the typical first meeting stuff. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Appreciate your update. Any questions or comments? Okay, not seeing any. Any other commissioners? I just want to make sure I don't miss anyone. Okay, we'll just go now to Jan Mathis, please, for Bike Advocates update.
Yeah, so Bike Advocates, the key thing that we've been working on recently is centered around more with education. We do have a Safe Routes to School coordinator. We've gotten a bike fleet, and then we're going to be working on a project at the middle school for them to rebuild their bike parking. and have events and education that's kind of tied around that. We've also met with Amy Markle to try to get some ideas around potentially getting bike parks in place of what we have some of our tennis courts around town. And we're really in the works of trying to figure out which ones would be most effective to help draw kids and draw families to specific parks. And then really the big thing is, since I am also a league cycling coach, we're looking at trying to get a BIPOC seminar to bring in folks that want to be teach bike safety throughout Minnesota to come here and to be able to get a sponsored seminar through QBP Quality Bike Products and help highlight all of the great things that we have in Richfield when it comes to walking and biking, and being able to bring in folks from a national level to be able to see those things. So I'm pretty excited about that.
That's great. Thank you for the update. Any questions or comments? Okay, seeing none. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. We now have other business as our next agenda item. Is there any other business? Okay, not seeing any. We'll move along to upcoming events / meetings. We have the 494 VQM listening session on 3/1.
Mr. Chair, thanks. I just threw this on there. This gets to what Transportation Engineer Ben Manabog was speaking to. There'll be a virtual listening session that MnDOT and their consultant is hosting, where they're kind of going to unveil the aesthetic concept that they settled on through the survey that is going through February 15th. Citywide postcards going out for that event. Some social media blasts you'll see on Facebook if you're into that. So I hope you all attend, and at a minimum, when you get that postcard in a week or so, at least take that survey. It's very short. It'll take you a couple minutes. So that's all I have on that.
Thank you. And then the next item is our March 2nd, 2022 Transportation Commission meeting. I'm assuming that if it's going to be in person, we will find out, but we should just plan on it being WebEx until we hear otherwise. Does that sound like appropriate advice?
Yeah, Mr. Chair. Yes, I think that's accurate. Hopefully, with Omicron dropping rapidly, as I'm reading at least, we can get back to meeting in person. I think we've had one in-person meeting in almost 2 years now, so that's very unfortunate for especially our newer commissioners. So, yeah, I think we're going to have a meeting in March, so just stay tuned for that information. And then one other thing I noted before after I sent the agenda out. Kelly Wynn, one of our executive specialists over at City Hall, notified us that there'll be a commissioner orientation run by the mayor and city attorney, Mary Teachin. I'm going to send that invite out to you all when I get the WebEx. That's going to be virtual. I know some of you attended it last year. It's just kind of a refresher on like the ethics of being a commissioner, how you do represent the city now as commissioners, et cetera. And then just kind of some parliamentary procedure 101 type stuff. So it should be pretty painless. I encourage you all to attend if you're available. So
Great. Thank you. We'll all look for that invite. Is there anything else before adjournment? Okay, we'll not see anything. The next meeting will be run by our new chair, Bradley. So congratulations again on that. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you all very much. Have a great rest of your evening. Take care.